Hi, I'm Daniel. I'm the game designer for Ancient Sands, and this is the fourth video in a series of videos that are exploring the different cards you'll find in the game, why we put them in the game, how they work, and different edge cases you might encounter. In the last video, we talked about the first set of treasures, and today we're going to continue looking at treasure cards that you'll encounter in the game. Now, we're not looking at these treasures from a tier 1, 2, 3 perspective. We're looking at them from a different family group perspective, so cards that share similar effects or similar types of effects. So the first family of cards we're going to be looking at are cards that modify your hand in some way. The first card is Natural Spring, which is a tier 1 treasure card, and when you dig this up, you draw a worker card and add it to your hand. Now this permanently increases your hand size by 1, which is wonderful in that it gives you a lot more strategic options and also protects you and lets you use rogues better. So picking this up early is a great thing. There are 2 of these, so if you can find both of them, you'll have a hand size of 3, which makes you much more versatile later on in the game. Great card to find early on. The tier 2 card that modifies your hand is the Supply Tunnel. Now when you dig up this card, you discard your entire hand. Now typically this is 1 card, but if you have dug up some Natural Springs, you're going to discard 2 or potentially 3. And then you search the worker deck for an equal number of cards to replace your hand. You can search the entire deck and take whatever you want. Depending on how late in the game this comes out, there could be a large number of those unique cards we discussed in the earlier videos left inside this deck. Or if you can wait until very, very late in the game where the deck is reshuffled, if you've gone through the entire thing, you can find exactly what you want at exactly the right time. Wonderful card to have. So the next family we're going to be looking at is a family of treasures that disrupt the desert in some way. This could be locking cards, this could be moving cards around and putting them in places that you might not want them to be. These cards were added in order to add a little bit of disruptive elements to the gameplay without making things too chaotic, just to keep people on their toes and prevent them from really planning out, oh, I know what I'm doing for the next 5 or 6 turns. So the first card is Hidden Switch. This is the most minor of these cards. All this one does is when you dig it up, you move a treasure from the top of a treasure stack to the bottom of another treasure stack. It has to be a different one, cannot be an empty stack. You can move it underneath locked cards, as it is targeting the stack and not the card particularly, but you cannot move a locked card itself. Pretty simple. The next one is Trap Pedestal. This is a tier 2 one, and when you dig this card up, you're going to lock adjacent treasures. Now, this is the first time this has come up, so we'll talk about this briefly. If I have a setup of treasures like this, these here are the adjacent ones. Diagonals cards are never considered adjacent to other treasure cards. So it only comes up in a few situations, but something important to know. And it is mentioned on the treasure card itself that diagonal treasures are not considered adjacent. So wonderful little card when you dig it up. You could potentially ruin someone's day by locking a treasure they're going after. And at the very least, you're going to significantly shrink the playing field, especially if it does end up locking 4 stacks around it. The next card we're going to look at is a tier 3 version of these effects, and this is the Mental Disruptor. When you dig up the Mental Disruptor, you flip all face-up treasure cards face down. So all the information that everyone has about the board is suddenly committed to memory, or as best as people can commit to memory. You'll be very surprised how quickly everyone else, including yourself, forgets where everything was, even if it was just 2 or 3 cards that were flipped down. Wonderful treasure, leads to a lot of moments where people are really trying really hard to remember which of the 2 treasures was the one they were going after. The last treasure in this family is the Reality Shifter, and this is probably one of my favorite treasures in the entire game. So when you dig up the Reality Shifter, you flip adjacent treasure stacks completely. So if this was my treasure stack and it was adjacent to my Reality Shifter and I dig it up, I flip the entire stack. So doing this will not only reverse the order of the cards, it will also reverse which side is showing. Now, this is one of the few effects that targets an entire stack. So any locked cards are also flipped. The entire stacks are flipped, even if they're in the middle. Nothing is protected from this ability. The whole thing flips up. So obviously the effects of this are apparent and wonderful. Things are completely thrown into disarray. Lots of information is either hidden or immediately revealed. And typically you'll have 2 or 3 cards at the bottom, oftentimes face down, so this card can not only reveal them and make them available, but flip them face up so that everyone knows exactly what is potentially there. Wonderful card, makes everyone panic and start digging as fast as possible. The next family we're going to be looking at is simply a 2-card family. These cards look at digging up additional cards. So the first card that you'll find is a Tier 1 card, arguably the best Tier 1 card in the game, potentially the best Tier 1 card in the game. It's Cave Mouth. When you dig up this card, it's worth 0 points, so you get nothing for it, but you immediately dig up whatever is under it. So if I dug up this card in this situation, I would immediately take whatever this was, in this case a Temporal Echo. So I would get the points of that card and any effects that that card has. The dig on the secondary card counts as using 0 workers, so if it was a wealth card, no one of those effects would trigger. The Cave Mouth is wonderful to dig up, but much more wonderful if you can scout it out. If you have a scout or an apprentice or any other card that lets you peek at things, or even flip them up and potentially flip them down so no one else can use it, knowing where the Cave Mouths are is very, very valuable. If you can move these on top of a Tier 3 and then dig them, you can get a Tier 3 for 6 dig power. That's most of the time 1 card. Very wonderful to find. The second card in this family is the Old Door. Now this is a Tier 2 card, so it's a little further down, a little harder to get than the Tier 1 version. But this lets you immediately dig an adjacent treasure. So like we said before, diagonals are not adjacent, but any of the cards, like this, would be valid targets for the Old Door. Much like the Cave Mouth, it counts as using 0 workers, but you could just pick any one of these, flip it up, and take it. Again, the Temporal Echo, I'm very good at finding those. And oftentimes you'll want to move this, if you can find it, around Tier 3s, if you know that it's there and you'll want to grab it. Also, because this card exists, if you're ever in a situation and you're digging up a Tier 2 card blindly, you'll want to pick up one that is adjacent to a Tier 3 card in case you do find an Old Door, because there are 2 of these in Tier 2. So you have a 1 in 8 chance of finding one, assuming none have been dug up and none of the treasures have been dug up. The next set of cards we're going to be looking at are cards that buff you for the rest of the game. So these are all constant cards. Their effects continue for the rest of the play time. And they are all very powerful passive abilities that will help your adventures out in the desert. So the first one we're talking about is Explosives Cache. This is a wonderful card to pick up. It's a Tier 2 card worth 1 point, and once you have it, you can now use your worker discard effects as though they were play effects. So any worker that I have that reads discard, like for example the Thief, I can use it as a play effect. However, I cannot trigger both effects on it. So if I was going to play a Thief, I would have to choose between swapping it with another worker or unlocking a treasure. Now the fact that I just said you can use a Thief, play it, and unlock a treasure should trigger memories for anyone who's been watching this video series, because I mentioned earlier that the champion's ability to play and unlock a treasure is one of the more powerful things in the worker deck. Having the Explosives Cache gives you a massive number of those cards. So this lets you manipulate locks very, very easily, lock things that you want, and know that it's very unlikely that anyone else is going to be able to dig them up, because only you have the ability, well, typically only you have the ability to play a card and unlock a treasure once you have the Explosives Cache. The next card in this is the Tool Cache. We have a lot of caches in this to find. The Tool Cache, when you dig, you keep your lowest value worker in play. So if I was digging and I have Thief, Excavator, and a Rogue, I keep the Thief, the Excavator, and the Rogue will be discarded as normal. Great card to have. It also sets you up for digging Tier 1s every single turn, because Tier 1s take 2 worker cards. So I can play a worker card, dig a Tier 1, play a worker card, dig a Tier 1, and keep doing this until all the Tier 1s are gone. Because of that, this card is worth 0 points, so you need to capitalize on the ability that it gave you, because the investment that you put into it gives you nothing towards scoring initially. So the final Tier 2 card we're going to be looking at in this family is the Intact Shield. So with the Intact Shield under your control, your workers cannot be discarded or moved by other players' effects. So this means that if someone plays a Thief, they cannot swap the Thief card with you. If someone discards a Supplier, your workers are safe, but you still do get the additional effects that the Supplier gives, so you will be able to dig any treasure that you would like. This also prevents other wealth treasures from messing with you, such as the ones we discussed earlier that caused players to be able to steal a card from you or to have you discard all of your cards. The one thing that does not impact are rogues, because they just swap them from your hand. They are not technically discarded or moved. Moving on to the Tier 3 treasures in this family, the first one we're going to be looking at is the Barrier Generator. is a marvelous, marvelous card to find. Only worth a single point on tier 3, so you know its effect has to be good. And while you have this card, you require one less worker card to dig for all treasure tiers. So this means you only need one worker to dig a tier 1, 2 workers to dig a tier 2, or 3 workers to dig a tier 3. This drastically accelerates your digging in the desert. And if you, by some miracle, are able to combine it with the tool cache, you also get to keep one of those workers in play. This means you're digging a tier 2 every single turn no matter what, or you're digging a tier 3 every other turn, assuming that no one messes with you or there's events or things that hurt you or impair your progress. So very, very powerful card to have. But again, it's only worth a single point and it has a lot of investment because it is a tier 3. The final card in this constant family is the Imperium Codex. So on each of your turns, before you play or discard, you're allowed to look at one face-down card that's at the top of any treasure stack, the top of the worker deck, or if you're playing with the event deck, the top of the event deck. So you could know if there's a sandstorm coming. You could know what the next person is going to draw. You could look at a treasure and know exactly what that treasure is. This card is wonderful to find, especially early on, as you can gather a lot of information over the course of the game that can really help you make the proper tactical decisions or warn you of horrible weather effects that are on the horizon, and you'll know that you need to dig immediately in order to not suffer the blunt of their powers. Now, the last family of treasures we're going to be looking at are treasures that were added to make sure that every player always has a chance until the game is over to win it. So these are all very, very potentially high-scoring treasures, very powerful treasures, things that everyone's going to be looking for. So the first one of these is a Wind Wheel. So this is a constant card, and its value is variable. So its value is equal to the number of empty locations that are in the game. So early on, typically worthless, potentially 1, maybe 2 points. Later on, it could be worth 6, 7 points, depending on how the game plays. And once you have this card, or if you know where this card is and you're trying to set up for it, you can use other cards, such as the Adventurer, to move treasures onto other stacks to create empty piles. And remember, once a pile is empty, nothing else can ever go back into it. So this card's value will never go down, it will only go up. Finding this at the end of the game is wonderful. The next one is the Treasure Trove. This is potentially the highest scoring card in the game. It's worth 3 points on its own, and if there's any cards underneath it, you immediately take them. Now, because you're taking them, you do not trigger any of the effects on those cards, you just get the raw point value for them. So that does not harm constant effects, though. So if the Treasure Trove was on top of you would dig up the Treasure Trove and then take the sword, and suddenly you have enormous number of points. We've had many games end with someone finding this card, moving it onto a very large pile, and then immediately digging it, giving every other player one turn to somehow come up with 10 or more points on top of what they've already had. Great card to find, better card to lock and prevent anyone from getting. The next card in this is the Mana Stabilizer. This card is the highest scoring card, at least for base value. It's worth 4 points. No other card is worth that much. However, you can only dig this card up if it will trigger the end of the game. So if this card will not bring you to 10 or more points, you have to leave it where you found it face up so everyone knows where it is. Really fun card to find, especially early on because everyone starts panicking, moves cards on top of it, locks it, buries it somewhere. And it's really good, especially against newer players because they get very distracted by it. So if you're watching this, you'll know that it's really not that impactful. Let them waste all of their cards hiding it and preventing someone from getting it. And you can go after cards that are just as late game disruptive without worrying about all the effort that's being wasted on this one. And the last one is actually a tier 2 card. So you can find this very early, but it's not very valuable for you up front. So this is the Arcane Amplifier. And when you dig up this card, you attach it to another card. And all you have to do that is just say which card you're attaching it to and slide it under or something like that, however you want to signify it for your group. Whatever treasure the amplifier is attached to has its base value doubled. So if it was a wealth treasure and you had the Ancient Crown, the +1 from the Ancient Crown would not be doubled. It would just be the base value. So for example, if it was the Ancient Coins, it would be worth 2, and if you had the crown, that would bring it up to 3. Great card to find at the end. Terrible card to find up front, especially if it's your first tier 2 and you only have tier 1s. The most you're going to get is a single point for this. Whereas if you find it for, say, the treasure trove, you could get another 3 points, or in a best case scenario, you could attach it to the sword here and have every single empty location be worth 2 points, which almost always is guaranteed to end the game immediately. And that's it. That covers all the treasures that you're going to find in Ancient Sands. I hope you found this informative and enjoyable to watch. And if you have any questions, let us know in the comments below or send us an email. We'll do our best to clarify anything. The next video is going to talk about the different event cards that you're going to be drawing every round and all of the terrible, terrible things that are going to happen to you as you're trying to take treasure from the desert.